All right, so we have a couple things we want to do today. We've already knocked out the networking panel, which is great. Now we're going to do a little bit of a presentation, then we're going to break in the middle, and we're actually going to practice together. So we're going to do some live networking with your coaches. And then we're going to break up and more or less do it for real, because after the session, we're actually going to have a real life networking event here. So we're going to present, we're going to tell you how to do it, then we're going to practice it, and then we're going to let you guys fly on your own. So it'll be good session. Okay, so what is a network? Well, I think the panelists said it really well. It's a collection of the people you know. It's not actually more complicated than that. The thing I want to tell you guys is it's not just the professional people you know. I think when I was starting out, I thought my network was either people I worked with, or it was like people who were more senior than me and had really cool jobs that I really wanted to get one day. And those are the people who I needed to like network with. But in reality, as Alvin was just saying, your network is people you're studying with right now. It's your people who are going to be, you know, your colleagues at your level in your first job. And so I think Alvin hit it right on the head. The message is, you know, do good work at every level. Look out for your friends, because eventually these people are also, they're going to get older and become the people whose jobs that, you know, they're going to become the people you look up to now, and it's going to be good to have those relationships. So think of network as everyone you know, and not just, you know, professional people, or not just important, serious people who you want to get to know at events like this. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and he's going to tell us how to network, basically.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Ed Swanson, also a consultant. And as we alluded to earlier in the presentation and during the panel, explaining what consulting is can be kind of tricky. But this is an example of something consultants do. We try to take nebulous problems like networking that are not really easy to define, and we put the structure to them. So this is something that we try to do in our daily life, and we've tried to apply this to networking. Now, in all honesty, at some point where you guys are going to be fantastic networkers, you're not going to need to think about this in a framework. You're not going to need to have little tips on each step. But to get you guys there and start thinking about all the little things you can do to be effective networkers, we have broken it down into a little bit more of a structure for you. And so let's jump into this now. So the first thing we want to talk about is LinkedIn. This is kind of the basis, we think is the basis for your networking process. It's more than just a resume you have on the internet. It's really a way to kind of collect all of your contacts and put them all into one place. It's a way you can reconnect with people, find out what old acquaintances are up to, congratulate them on things they're doing in their life. You can connect with other people that have similar interests. You can follow companies or groups that you are interested in, and you think, and meet people through that you share interests with. And you can also, LinkedIn actually has a very good job searching function where you can look for jobs as well. And so LinkedIn is super useful for kind of centralizing all of your networking activities. Some things you would probably not want to use LinkedIn for is posting unprofessional or personal things that maybe shouldn't be going on the internet. This obviously also goes for Facebook. You should also, and we've touched on this a little bit, but avoid making unreasonable requests. Reaching out to people you don't know, asking for a job, maybe not the best approach for LinkedIn. Maybe reaching out to them and looking to find out more about what their job is or what their company does, probably a more applicable application for LinkedIn. But we're going to get into that a little bit more detail later, how to actually use, and that'll be a part of our online communication section. So maybe we can jump into that. So for those of you that have a LinkedIn profile, fantastic, great. For those of you that don't have a LinkedIn profile, I think the first thing I want you to do when you go home tonight is go home and make one. You really don't need much to have a basic profile, okay? We basically have 5 things here. You need a picture of yourself. A headshot is generally best, but anything that looks professional and has you smiling, you want to seem approachable and friendly. Optional pro tip is you can use a background image to showcase some interests of yours. Doesn't have to be necessarily professional, but adds a little color to your profile. You can also edit the headline, which is usually what your job title is, but if you guys are students and you don't have a job, you can edit that to be something a bit more of a tagline for yourself, to sell yourself. Just being a student is not really interesting, but your student's super interested in renewable energy or whatever your interests are, you can really highlight that there so people see, oh, right, okay, you have something you're really passionate about. You can also, oh, no, it's all right. There's also a summary where you can provide a slightly longer narrative about yourself. Best to keep this short and sweet, no longer need to write a story about yourself, but something that gives people a bit more context can be helpful. And finally, experience and professional interests. These are things you just want to provide some color as to what you've done and what you're interested in doing. Give people a bit of an idea of what the experience you have and the experience you're interested in gaining. But again, the take-home message is, if you don't have a profile right now, go out and make it. And if you do, go out and make sure it's up to date. Make sure you've got all your details in there. Make sure you maintain it. And when you meet people, add them in there. Maybe we can go to the next one. Okay, so now we want to talk a bit about networking events. Okay, so where do you do this quote-unquote networking? Well, there's a ton of things that be considered networking events, and they're not always going to be labeled networking events. They can be happy hours. There can be a guest speaker coming to talk about something like what we're doing today. There can be trade-hosted events. There are a number of things that can be considered a networking event, okay? And once you guys get jobs, there's a ton of professional organizations around Seattle that host specific networking events for you to meet people in your industry or that you would be interested in meeting. But you guys are in a very specifically special situation where there's a way more opportunities available to you as students. Organizations are really happy to have students join and volunteer, and there's a ton of things happening on campus that are bringing events right to you. Trust me, once you start working, it's not as easy to find these events, and you have to go a bit more out of your way. But they're bringing them right to you. So it's really important at this stage in your life and your career to be taking advantage of what's here on campus, okay, and what's here and being brought to you, because you have a wealth of opportunities right here, and there's a ton of organizations that would be happy to have you volunteer and help put on these events, and then you get to actually talk. You get like an inside kind of connection to the people that are there and hosting. So something to think about. So once you have a networking event in mind, and you start thinking about, okay, what do I have to do to get ready for this? There's a number of things you can do. Today we're going to talk about like things you can do right now, and it can be prepared for these events. Have like an elevator speech kind of ready in your mind, and know the talking points you want to hit when you go and talk to someone new. When you start thinking about it a little bit further out, you want to spend some time kind of searching for like what industries are you looking for, what are potential employers that you're trying to make connections to. These are the kind of things you want to start thinking about when you have a bit more time to plan. And finally, when you're the day of the event, you really want to make sure you know what your points you want to hit home are, and then you're going to make a really strong first impression when you meet someone. You're obviously going to develop these connections over time, but it's important to make sure you make that first connection really strong and make a good first impression. So I mentioned elevator speech. And what is an elevator speech? Well, it's essentially a collection of ideas that really markets you as an individual, okay? Doesn't necessarily have to be a speech, though. It's just it's a collection of these talking points that you're going to try to drive home, okay? And when would you use one? Well, we have a number of examples here. Maybe when you're meeting a hiring manager, you want to get information about what jobs they're offering, okay? Maybe you have a professor you're interested in going to do research for the summer, and you want to make a connection with them and find out what opportunities are in their lab. Maybe there's an alumni at the university you would like to connect to and find out more about their career and find out what they've done in their life. These are all times when you would want to think about having an elevator speech ready. Anytime when someone asks you to give a little pitch about yourself, explain what you do and what you're interested in, these are times. And so in order to have a good elevator speech ready, we think it's important to have kind of three main ideas clear in your head. Who are you? Like, what makes you different? What are your strengths? What are you interested in? What do you do? What are you proud of? What do you think is important to you? And finally, and this is the important part, what are you looking for? What are you trying to get out of a networking event? Are you making connections? Or you're finding about a particular industry? These are the kind of things you want to have clear in your mind when you're getting ready to meet someone new. And an important part here is to, don't plan on reciting a monologue with all of these things. Don't just come up to someone and hammer them with a whole bunch of ideas really quickly. Let it happen as a conversation. It should be a back and forth kind of thing. But, you still want to have clear the messages you want to convey, okay? Now, when you actually go to an event, there's a bunch of things, and the panelists touched on a number of very good ones, that you should and should not do. The do's, definitely. You're going to this event to meet new people. This is the point. It's going to be awkward, trust me. The first couple of times, it's not going to feel right. It's going to feel weird. You're looking at a huge introvert that, I don't like going up and meeting new people. I don't like speaking in public, but I'm here doing this. I got a job that requires it every day of my life. It's totally possible to get there, trust me. Okay? But the important part is be authentic. Okay? Don't try to position yourself as something you're not. Don't try to put on some persona that isn't authentic. You want to make sure you're actually being you, so that people get a feeling for who you are, and you can make those genuine connections. You also want to be prepared to land your message. Who are you? What are you looking for? Don't just go to someone and just be a wallflower and say, go up and nice to meet you, and don't say anything else. You want to have some kind of a message to deliver, something you're trying to get out of the interaction. At the same time, don't go up and give them a huge long monologue. Have some tight little talking points you can deliver. You want to be engaged. You want to also spend some time listening to them, asking them questions, getting them to open up and learning something about them. But at the same time, don't forget what you're looking for. And these events, while you want to make strong connections, you also don't want to occupy all of someone's time. They're also there to meet new people. They're also there to establish connections. If you dominate someone's time all night and don't let them get away and try to really make as strong a connection as you can by occupying them and not letting them, not letting anyone get to them, it's probably not going to leave the best impression. So maybe try to avoid that. Finally, then, you want to get some contact information so you can follow up. So make sure at the end you're getting that contact information. So a quick note on what to do after the event, and we touched on this, is try to find a way to make notes or keep track of who you met. It's good. A lot of people, there's a number of different ways you can do this, but it's important to keep track of the names so you can actually connect with them later, what they're interested in, some key facts you learned about them. You can also just think about the event overall. Was this an industry meeting where you learned a lot about a specific industry? It's good to capture all these things afterwards so you can refer back to them. Not only just for reaching out to people, just for your own knowledge about industries or future job opportunities.
Now, I believe, you guys, it's practice time. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We have given you a template in your folders that can help you it's like a write your own elevator pitch. So we're gonna take 5 minutes and have you kind of work on your own to fill this out and just do some thinking on the key messages you want to hit during your elevator pitch.
So I've already given some of you my business cards, so this will be a good introduction of how to contact me or not to contact me. So the panelists, I think, did a really good job of talking about how to reach out, either after a networking event or after you've met somebody, or to pose an inquiry to someone. So we want to talk a little bit about some different scenarios in which you may reach out to someone online. So to follow up in an in-person meeting, so I think the panelists highlighted this well. Something really important to do is to refresh that person's memory of how they met you. And it doesn't need to be a long paragraph, but just something to trigger their memory. So you might do this, as people have mentioned today, via LinkedIn, or you might do this via email. Another way you might reach out to someone, and this is speaking to being really clear about what your ask is, what you want from that person, is to request an informational interview. And an informational interview, hopefully all of you guys are familiar with that, but it's really an excellent way to find out more about an industry or a person that you want to learn more about, to request to get to know more about their career path or their job or how they got there. To make an introduction. So the panelists highlighted really well that it's not just about extending your network, but also helping other people who are in your network is a really good way to build your social circle and the people who can help you in the future. And so you might have an opportunity where you introduce people who have similar interests or passions, or they're working in a similar field. You may broker an introduction to someone else. Request an introduction, so the opposite. So you have met me tonight and you heard me talk about something that's of interest to you, and so you may reach out to me to request me to introduce you to someone else. And finally, one of the other ways you might reach out online, or one of the other reasons, is to inquire about job openings. So you meet somebody or you see something online about a job, and there's something that's not obviously apparent. So, what's the deadline for this job application? But you might reach out to find out more about the job and what they're looking for. So here's an example. And let me read it to you. You can also read it along. But Dear John, we met briefly after your presentation yesterday, and I would like you to help me get a job in a research lab. As we discussed, I have extensive experience in laboratory techniques that are relevant to your research, such as PCR, I didn't write this because I don't know what that is, enzyme purification, and many activity assays. In addition, I received a B+ average in my extensive coursework in microbiology and genetic engineering. Do you think my credentials are enough to get me a job in a research lab? Would you hire someone like me? Can you recommend that some of your colleagues hire me? As you can tell, I really want a job, LOL. Looking forward to hearing a positive reply from you very soon. Best, Jennifer. Whoever put my name on this. So, reading that, any ideas of a couple things that maybe aren't so great about this email? Yes.
Well, he was pointing out that he said laugh out loud for wanting a job, so it's kind of like, I don't really...
So a little casual. Yeah, followed up by the smiley face. Got it. Any other ideas of maybe what's not so great about this email? Yep. So let's throw up a couple don'ts. So number one, you don't want to summarize your email. They become really, really long really quickly because you all have a lot of great achievements, and they're not so interesting to read. 2, be prescriptive with your requests. So we talked about, the panelists mentioned this, you want to be clear about what your ask is. Do you want to get coffee? Do you want to meet them in person? Do you want them to introduce you to someone? So the slide we talked about earlier. So be clear about what you want, but don't be too prescriptive. Can you tell them to hire me? Okay, make a laundry list of difficult questions. As Ed was saying, explaining what management consulting can be a really difficult task. I received an email from someone who went to my undergrad recently, and there was there was just a litany of questions, some of them being, can you tell me what clients you work for, what management consulting is, why you like it, So a laundry list of difficult questions that are difficult to respond to via email is something you want to avoid. Ask for something the person can't easily give, like a job. People by nature want to help you, so ask for something that is easy for them to give, like having coffee, or an introduction. Use slang or shorthand, as we talked about, or write a long letter. So remember to keep your expectations reasonable. People are busy. Our panelists highlighted that as well. They may not get back to you right away, but as I said, most people want to get in touch with you and help you out. So they might not have a lot of time to give you, but they will likely give you some. Okay, so let's look at what a good example looks like. Much shorter, as you can tell. So, Dear John, it was great to meet you the other day. After I heard you describe your job with so much enthusiasm, I decided to look you up on LinkedIn within 24 hours. I would like to add you to my network as I plan to explore opportunities in the IT space in the coming year. Hope we can connect again in person. Best. So, much shorter, much clearer. This could probably even have a more clear ask to it. Could we meet for coffee, or could we follow up? But I think this is a great example of just establishing a connection. Might be a good example of a similar type if you took out the LinkedIn contact that you might send via LinkedIn. So it's brief and it's genuine. It's tailored to that specific person. It doesn't look like you copy-pasted. It reminds the person how you met them, which is great. The grammar and the spelling is perfect, as usual, which is always critical. The questions are short and focused. It's focused on a single ask. It's courteous and respectful of time. And as we mentioned, it comes with a LinkedIn connection. So I think this last point is key. Don't expect somebody to respond right away. Don't be discouraged. If there isn't a connection right away, it can take people time to get through the millions of emails. And be prepared if they offer to get in touch. So a good example of this, I was asked recently for coffee by someone who went to my grad school, and they have since canceled 3 times on me. So I've said, yes, I would love to talk to you about what I'm doing and how you could go on that career path as well. scheduled, canceled, scheduled, canceled. So make sure that if you do ask for something, that you're able to follow up and deliver on that, whether it's coffee or an interest in an internship or something like that.
Right. So this is the final piece. So this is what we talked about at the beginning, that, this is how to make connections, how to meet people at networking events. But really, the magic is when you can sustain relationships over time. And these single contacts that you make perhaps today become 10-year-long, real, authentic networking relationships. So why does that matter? Well, true mentorship and coaching happens over many years. It's not like a one-day thing, right? Opportunities come and go. So like the example I gave at the beginning of the day, you may talk to someone, you may make a great impression on them, and for whatever reason, there just may not be an opportunity to work together or at this point in time, but keep that relationship up. That may come down the road. It's authenticity, right? It makes it less transactional. If, like the example I gave at the beginning of the day, if I've known you for 5 years, if you ask me to put in a good word for you at my job, I'm going to do that because I know that, you didn't ask me the first time we met, the 7th time or whatever. It was more like I now trust you and feel comfortable and authentically want to help you. And finally, it's just, it's the right thing to do. I mean, sort of as our panelists said to begin with, your network should be your friends, right? We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this is a collection of people who you like and like you. And it's just the right thing to do to maintain your relationships. So how do you do that? Well, it's the right rhythm, right? So like when I'm telling you to maintain your relationships, that doesn't mean that every week you should send your network a brief, hey, here's how my week went email, just to keep them abreast. It's more like, there's no right or wrong answer here, but it feels kind of like 3 times a year, is the right amount of sort of cadence to make sure you're still on their radar, you're up to date, but you're not overwhelming. Stay persistent. So even people who are in my network who I, have known for years, who I've had multiple conversations with, at times they don't respond to my emails and I don't respond to their emails because rarely is a networking request or, getting coffee. It's usually not the urgent number one thing you need to do that day. That doesn't mean that person wants to unfriend you or doesn't want to ever see you again. Don't take it that way. It means people are busy. Give them a few weeks, give them a month, and then not reach out again. And lastly, it was our panelists said this before, but be helpful. I think it's super cool when really young people like yourselves, like college students, ask if they can help me in any way. For 2 reasons. One is you can do more than you think, and 2, I just think it's the right. I don't know. It shows humility and sort of like it makes me kind of respect you in a way like you're not just asking, but we're already kind of in a peer relationship. So I always made it a habit even when I was young to always ask, if I could help the person I was networking. And sometimes they laughed and were like, haha, no, not yet. But anyways, I think it's just a good look, it's a good thing to do. So tips, how can you make it happen? Here's some really practical ideas. Some of these are sort of over the top, but some of them are going to fit with you and you pick out what works for you. So set a calendar alert every few months to remind you to keep in touch with certain contacts. So you can set a count. You can if you meet somebody now and you had a great coffee with them and you want to make sure that 2 months from now you say, hey, what's up? Like how have you been? Put it in your calendar from 2 months from now. You'll get an alert that'll remind you. Think of interesting reasons to talk to people. The most authentic ways to kind of stay in touch are when you read an article that happens to pique the interest or be in an interest area of someone who you've already met, and you forward them that article. Hey, I saw this in the New York Times today. This made me think of you. And even better if you can say, hey, I wonder if you could share this with your team or whatever. Now you're being helpful, right? That's a great way to sort of like at a young age to actually be really helpful to somebody because you're opening their eyes to something that you saw, right? And it also kind of makes it an intellectual conversation. Do you have a comment? All right. So asking for help. I mean, I know this kind of back and forth on how transactional it'll be, but I think if you genuinely establish a relationship with somebody, asking for help is a great way to build commitment in you, right? And so ask for something small. Like don't ask the first interaction to be, hey, can I get a job at your firm? But maybe, hey, if you have 5 minutes, could you look at my resume and just give me some advice? That's a small thing. Could you read this cover letter real quick that I'm about to send out to somebody? Can you put me in touch with someone here? I mean, if I have helped you now, I kind of subconsciously feel connected to you and want to, make sure that we stay in touch. But also, there you go, also help even if you feel like you have nothing to give right now. So take it offline. I mean, an element, again, this is kind of a feel thing, but if the last 3 times you've connected with somebody, it's been, a phone call or an email, like it's probably time to try to get a coffee with them, because it's not practical to every connection you make with somebody to be in person because we're busy or you may live in other parts of the state or even the country. But if we never get to that point, we're not really going to build that deep, authentic relationship. So ask for a coffee. And also, you know what? You go out of your way to go meet someone somewhere. Hey, can I come to your office? I always like that, right? Especially like if you're busy, if someone's coming to you, it shows, hey, they must really care about this conversation. So that's a tip as well. I do think a lot of people send out sort of emails when they have a major life change. In fact, I got one today. One of my really good friends, who's also I've worked with a bit professionally, just changed his job, right? He wrote me an email today, say, hey guys, and I was BCC'd on it, which meant that he was sending it to probably hundreds of people. Hey, just want to tell you, had a life update, left my career here, and I'm doing this, right? That's a great way for me if now the thing he basically, I'll tell you exactly what he said. This is an interesting sign of the times. I'm leaving my investment banking job at Morgan Stanley to go take a full stack developing course at a coding academy, right? So to go back to school at 30 plus after working in Wall Street for 10 years. So that gives you a sense for where the economy's going. As an aside, you guys made a good decision. We did not. Anyways, but now if I knew somebody who was starting a startup and needed some coders for internships, I might pop him an email and say, hey, Mikey, that's awesome. It's Mikey from undergrad, we went to school together. So, hey, Mikey, let me introduce you to my friend who's starting a company. Might be good for you to talk to him, right? Now, again, if you do this every month, it's over the top. But when you really do have a big life change, like for you all, when you graduate from college, that might be a good time to ping your network and let them know what's up. I've never managed to do this, but some people tell me they do it, and I think it'd be like the most elite way to keep track of people. But, like LinkedIn is a great low impact way to keep a network, but maybe for the most important contacts, a Google Doc, a OneNote where you keep notes on them and their email address, just so you make sure you keep that up to yourself. And then I think be diligent about LinkedIn. I almost always accept people who I know, I always accept someone if I know them, if we've had any kind of conversation, right? And you may think, okay, I met you tonight, it was more of a friend thing, I don't really need to LinkedIn, but 5 years from now, you might want to be going through your LinkedIn network and say, do I know anybody who works at Google, for example? I didn't work at Google when you met me, time goes by, I work there now, we were LinkedIn friends, now you can find me, right? So I would just be pretty aggressive about adding people to your network in that way. It's really no harm. It's a very low impact thing to do. It's been a pleasure. I want to thank all of you for coming out. I really want to thank my colleagues from BCG for taking time out of their day.